I'm Kabili with another episode of Photo Tools Weekly. Our topic this week is layer masking in Photoshop. Whether you're a new or experienced Photoshop user, having a good understanding of how a layer mask works will help you to create good photo composites, target your photo adjustments, and practice non-destructive or reversible editing. So let's start with understanding what a layer mask is. In a nutshell, a layer mask is an overlay that you attach to a layer in order to hide part of that layer's content from view. This is true whether the masked layer contains content, like a photograph, or even an adjustment, as in an adjustment layer. Let's look at a simple content example. Here I have an image open in Photoshop with two layers. The bottom layer contains this photograph of a wedding bouquet, and the top layer contains a wedding invitation, which, by the way, I made by merging an image of embossed paper with a text layer. Now, this invitation is completely covering the photograph on the layer below, and I want part of the photograph to peek through. So I'm going to add a layer mask to the invitation layer to hide part of the invitation layer. To do that, I'll make sure the invitation layer is selected in the Layers panel, and I'll come down and click this icon, the one that looks like a circle inside of a rectangle. That's the Create New Layer Mask icon. Some people call it the washing machine icon because it kind of looks like a front-loading washing machine. That adds this white layer mask thumbnail to the right of the image thumbnail on the invitation layer. A layer mask can only be white like this one, or black, or a shade of gray. And that's because a mask in Photoshop is an 8-bit or a grayscale item. Now, there's a little saying that will help you remember how layer masks work. On a layer mask, white reveals, black conceals. That means that where a layer mask is white, as this one is everywhere, it reveals the layer to which it's attached. So this layer mask is revealing the entire invitation layer. But where a layer mask is black, it conceals the layer to which it's attached. And if there's any gray paint on a layer mask, the gray will partially conceal that layer. So let's go ahead and add some black paint to this layer mask to hide part of the invitation layer. First, you want to make sure that you have the layer mask thumbnail highlighted. There'll be a white border around it when it's highlighted. One of the gotchas of layer masking is that sometimes you may have your image thumbnail highlighted like this, and then if you paint with black or gray or white, you'll be painting right on the image. That isn't what you normally want to do. So I'm going to select the layer mask thumbnail. Then I'll move over to the Tools panel. I'll select my brush tool. I'll come down to the foreground and background color boxes. I'm going to press X on my keyboard to switch those so that black is the foreground color. I have a soft edge brush. I'm just going to come into the image and start painting with black on the layer mask. And as I do, I'm concealing part of the invitation layer so we can see down through in those areas to the lovely bouquet on the layer below. On the layer mask thumbnail, you can see where I painted with black, but if you want a larger view of that, you can hold down the Option key, that's the Alt key on a PC, and click on the layer mask thumbnail to see the layer mask in the document window. And there's the black paint that's concealing part of the invitation layer, the gray paint that's partially revealing the invitation layer, and that gray paint comes from the soft edge on my brush tip, and the white paint that's completely revealing the invitation layer. I'll Option or Alt click again on the layer mask thumbnail to bring the image back into view. One of the benefits of a layer mask is that it can always be edited. So if I paint too far over to the left here with my black paint on the layer mask, and I want to remove that black paint, I won't try to erase, and there's really no need to undo. All I have to do is switch to white paint by pressing X on the keyboard, and then painting with white on that area of the layer mask. And again, that's revealing the invitation in that area, so we no longer see the photograph below, where I've just painted with white. There are other ways to add paint to a layer mask. One way is with a black to white gradient. Common use for this gradient technique is to softly blend one photograph into another to make a photographic composite. So let me show you how to do that. I'll select the gradient tool in the Tools panel. I'll take a look at the Layers panel and make sure that I still have my layer mask thumbnail selected. I'll check my foreground and background color. I can see that I have white as the foreground and black as the background. So I'm going to start over on the left side of this image because I'm starting my gradient with white, and I'll drag, and then I'll release my finger from the mouse. The length and direction of the line that I drag determines the shape of the gradient that I'm drawing on the layer mask and its effect on the image. So if I don't like this result, I'll just draw another gradient. I don't have to undo. Each time I drag out a gradient, it just replaces the one before. I'll hold the Option key or the Alt key on a PC and click on that layer mask thumbnail so you can see it, so that you can understand that over on the left, where there's white on the layer mask, we see the invitation layer completely, and then the gradual application of gray paint from the gradient is starting to hide the invitation layer and allow the flowers to show through. And then over on the far right, we're completely hiding the invitation layer, so the flowers show through most strongly over on the right. Let's Option or Alt click again to see that result. Now I can combine the brush tool method with the gradient tool method to refine this result. So I'm going to get my brush tool again. I have white as my foreground color, and so I'm just going to paint with some white here to bring back more of the invitation layer so we can see that text a little bit better on top of the flowers. And if I Option or Alt click again on the mask, you can see right here where I've painted with white on the mask, right on top of the gradient.
We'll call you in 2 minutes.
Option or Alt click again on that layer mask thumbnail. A third way to add paint to a layer mask is by making a selection and filling the selection. So if I go up to my elliptical marquee tool and choose the rectangular marquee tool from behind it, and then I come into the image and I make a rectangular selection, and then I fill that selection with black with the layer mask thumbnail selected. I'll do that by pressing Command Delete, that's Control Backspace on a PC, and that fills with whatever color is in the background color box, which happens to be black on my computer. And then I'll press Command D on a Mac, Control D on Windows to remove that selection. So now you can see that there's black right here in this rectangular box on the layer mask thumbnail, and that black is completely concealing the invitation layer in this area, so we have a strong view of the flowers beneath. You can even create a selection before you create a layer mask, which also comes in handy. Now before I go, I want to show you one more application for layer masks, and that is to limit the area where you're applying an adjustment. So you can use the layer mask that comes with every adjustment layer in the same way that we've used a layer mask here on a content layer. To show you that, I'm going to click the eye icon on the invitation layer to turn that layer off completely. And I'm going to select the photograph layer. Now, let's say that I want to add a colorizing effect to just the backdrop, not to this bouquet. First, I'll go down to the Create New Fill and Adjustment Layer icon. And from there, the bottom of the Layers panel, I'm going to choose a Hue Saturation Adjustment Layer. The Properties panel now shows me controls for my new Hue Saturation Adjustment Layer. And in the Properties panel, I'm going to check the Colorize checkbox, and then I'll move the hue slider to a color that I like. I think I'm going to go with a medium blue. Now take a look at my new Hue Saturation Adjustment Layer in the Layers panel. It comes with its own white layer mask, as do all adjustment layers. With that layer mask thumbnail selected, highlighted in white, I'm going to limit where this adjustment is being applied on the photo by painting with black on the layer mask. So I'll go over to the brush panel, I'll select the brush tool, I'll switch to black paint by pressing X on the keyboard, and then I'll move into the image and I'll start to paint in the area of the bouquet. And what I'm doing is hiding this colorizing effect on the Hue Saturation Adjustment Layer so that it's only applying where I want it in the backdrop. And there's more. I can share that same layer mask that I've created on this Hue Saturation Adjustment Layer with another adjustment. So let's say that I add another adjustment layer from the Create New Adjustment Layer icon here at the bottom of the Layers panel. I'll get the Brightness Contrast Adjustment. I'm going to drag the brightness slider way to the left in the Properties panel. I'm trying to darken that backdrop quite a bit, but I don't want the bouquet to be that dark. Now, I could paint with black on the Brightness Contrast Adjustment layer mask, but I already have a layer mask created that I can use. So to save time, I'm just going to use that same layer mask. I'll select the layer mask on my Hue Saturation layer. I'll hold down the Option key, that's the Alt key on Windows, and I'll drag that layer mask up and drop it on the Brightness Contrast layer mask, and I'll click Yes at the prompt asking whether I want to replace the layer mask. That means replace that white layer mask on the Brightness Contrast Adjustment layer. And there's the result. Copying my layer mask to the Brightness Contrast Adjustment layer is hiding that darkening adjustment from the bouquet and applying it only here on the left where there's white on the layer mask. So those are the basics of creating and using layer masks on a content layer as well as on an adjustment layer. Whether this has been a refresher or an introduction for you, I hope that you found it a useful resource that you can come back to on the Photo Tools Weekly course page whenever you have a basic question about layer masking.